I walked into the family furniture business every day for 15 years, pouring my heart and soul into growing what my grandfather built from nothing. Each morning, I proudly unlocked the doors of Hartwell Fine Furnishings, believing that one day I would take over the legacy. Then came that Tuesday afternoon when my parents called me into the office. I thought we were discussing my future promotion. Instead, they told me they were handing everything to my younger brother Jackson. Just like that, 15 years of dedication meant nothing. My name was Brian, and I had become a stranger in my own family. Let me know where you are watching from today, and hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how this devastating betrayal turned into the most unexpected blessing in disguise. Trust me, you will want to hear how this story ends. The foundations of my family legacy were built in 1978 when my grandfather, Thomas Hartwell, opened a small furniture store in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He had been a craftsman all his life, developing a reputation for quality handmade pieces that would last generations. His small workshop grew into a retail store as demand increased, and by the time I was born, my father William had joined the business and begun expanding it into neighboring towns. My earliest memories revolve around those stores. Weekends meant tagging along with Dad, watching him greet customers and negotiate with suppliers. I loved the smell of wood polish and leather, the way sunlight streamed through the showroom windows, illuminating beautiful dining tables and elegant sofas. While other kids played sports or video games, I was learning about wood types and upholstery techniques from the craftsmen in our workshop. Brian has the Hartwell eye, my grandfather would say proudly, whenever I could identify a dovetail joint or spot the difference between cherry and mahogany. He passed away when I was 12, but those words stayed with me, giving me purpose and direction. Jackson came along when I was 8 years old. From the beginning, he was different from me in every way. Where I was serious and detail-oriented, Jackson was charming and outgoing. He could make anyone laugh and was the center of attention at family gatherings. My parents doted on him, often excusing his poor grades or missed responsibilities, because that is just how Jackson Island. While I sometimes envied his easy charm, I never resented him. We were brothers with different strengths, and I genuinely believed there was room for both of us in the family story. Besides, I had my place secured through dedication and hard work. By 14, I was spending every summer working in various departments of the business. I unloaded trucks in receiving arranged showroom displays, assisted customers, and even apprenticed with our master craftsmen. My father nodded approvingly when I chose to major in business management at Michigan State University. Smart choice. Brian, he said, someday this will all be yours to run, and you will need to understand every aspect of the business. Those words cemented my life plan. I took extra courses in accounting and marketing, joined entrepreneur clubs, and spent my free time reading business biographies. Every decision was made with Hartwell Fine Furnishings in mind. After graduation, I started full-time in our warehouse, just as my father had done decades earlier. I wanted to earn respect through merit, not nepotism. Within 3 years, I had worked my way up to inventory manager, then showroom supervisor, and finally regional operations director, overseeing 3 of our 6 locations. Each promotion came with long hours and proven results. My proudest achievement was implementing a new inventory management system that reduced our overhead costs by 23%. The company saved thousands of dollars that first year alone. Dad clapped me on the shoulder during the quarterly meeting when I presented the results. That is the kind of forward thinking that will take this company into the next generation, he announced to the entire staff. There were moments when I noticed subtle signs that something was off. When we opened our 6th location, Dad mentioned that someday you and your brother will run this place together, despite Jackson showing zero interest in the business. When I brought potential investors to a dinner, Mom spent the evening showing them pictures of Jackson's college fraternity activities instead of discussing our expansion plans. But I dismissed these moments as normal family dynamics, nothing to worry about. I believed I was the natural successor. Everyone did. Vendors asked about when you take over, and longtime employees joked about what they would call me once I had Dad's office. Even Sarah, the woman I started dating during this time, observed how the business seemed built into my DNA. "You light up when you talk about the future of Hartwell's," she would say, squeezing my hand supportively. How wrong we all were. The first real disappointment came shortly after Jackson graduated from college with a marketing degree and mediocre grades. Dad immediately created a director of brand development position for him with a salary higher than managers who had been with us for decades. I tried to be supportive, showing Jackson the ropes and including him in management meetings, but he was often late, unprepared, or busy on his phone. "Give him time," Mom said when I expressed concern. "Not everyone is as intense as you are, Brian. The business needs different types of people." I swallowed my frustration and focused on our upcoming expansion. We were preparing to open our 7th location, and I had spent 6 months researching the perfect spot, analyzing neighborhood demographics and competitor locations. I presented a comprehensive proposal for a site in an up-and-coming area with excellent growth potential. "Interesting," Dad said, barely glancing at my research. "But Jackson thinks we should be in the riverfront district. He says it is more trendy. The rent there is triple, and foot traffic data shows most visitors are tourists who would not make large furniture purchases," I explained, pulling up the charts I had prepared. "Sometimes you need to think beyond the numbers," Dad replied dismissively. "Jackson has good instincts about these things." They signed the lease for the riverfront location the following week. The store never turned a profit and closed within 18 months. Around this time, our sales director retired, and I was certain the position would be mine. I had been handling many of those responsibilities already and had developed strong relationships with our key accounts. When Dad called me into his office, I expected the promotion. "We have hired Thomas Daniels from Rochester Furniture Mart," he announced instead. "He will be our new sales director, and you will report to him starting next week." Thomas Daniels. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Dad, he was responsible for their failed expansion that almost bankrupted them. Why would we bring him in when I have been preparing for this role?" "You are too valuable in operations," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Besides, we need fresh perspectives from outside the family sometimes." That evening, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen when they thought I had left. "Brian is just too serious," Mom was saying. "He lacks the personal touch with the high-end clients. Jackson has that natural charm." I know, Dad sighed. "Brian is brilliant with systems and numbers, but this business is about relationships. He does not have that gift like his brother does." I stood frozen in the hallway, their words cutting deeper than any knife could. 15 years of dedication reduced to too serious and lacking natural charm. I drove home in a daze, questioning everything I thought I knew about my place in the family and the business. The following months brought more slights and disappointments. My inventory control suggestions were shelved. My customer loyalty program proposal was delayed repeatedly. Meanwhile, Jackson spearheaded a flashy marketing campaign featuring celebrities that cost a fortune and delivered minimal returns. When I pointed out the poor ROI in our quarterly review, Dad changed the subject. "Sarah noticed the toll it was taking on me." "You come home angry almost every night now," she said gently. "Maybe it is time to have a direct conversation with your parents about what is happening." I took her advice and requested a family dinner at my parents' house without spouses or partners to discuss the business. I laid out my concerns calmly with specific examples of how my contributions were being minimized while Jackson's failures were being excused. "You are just jealous because your brother connects with people better than you do," Mom said, her voice sharp with defensiveness. "Not everything is about spreadsheets and efficiency, Brian. This has nothing to do with jealousy," I insisted. "This is about recognizing 15 years of proven results versus 2 years of costly mistakes." Dad leaned forward, his expression stern. "When you started in this business, I told you that someday it would be yours to run. But things change, Brian. The market is different now. We need innovation and personality, not just careful management. I left that dinner knowing something fundamental had shifted. At Thanksgiving the following week, I noticed how my parents beamed when Jackson told animated stories about client meetings, while my mention of securing a major hotel contract was met with polite nods. The distance between us grew wider, the family photos on the wall suddenly feeling like images of strangers. In January, our largest competitor approached us about a potential merger. I spent weeks analyzing the proposal, concluding it would dilute our brand identity and reduce our profit margins. I prepared a detailed presentation for the board meeting, only to discover the decision had already been made in a private strategy session I had not been invited to. "We have signed the preliminary agreement," Dad announced, when I asked when we would discuss the merger. "Jackson and I met with their team last week. It is a good move for our future." "You made this decision without consulting me?" I asked, stunned. "I am the operations director. This affects everything in my department." "Jackson felt we needed to move quickly," Dad replied. "He has been handling the negotiations." That night I found an email that had been accidentally copied to me. It outlined a 5-year transition plan for the company. Jackson was listed as CEO designate. My name appeared under regional management team with no clear advancement path. The document was dated 6 months earlier. The pieces suddenly fit together. The ignored suggestions. The outside hires for positions I should have filled. The private meetings. This was not coincidence or misunderstanding. This was a deliberate plan to sideline me while grooming Jackson to take over everything I had worked for. 2 weeks later, I received a calendar invitation for a meeting titled Hartwell Future Leadership Structure. It was scheduled in the conference room at headquarters, with only my parents, Jackson, and the company attorney listed as attendees. My stomach clenched as I accepted the invitation, knowing this would be the moment of truth. The conference room felt unusually cold that Thursday morning. Mom and Dad sat on one side of the table, with Jackson beside them. Attorney Frank Stillwell sat at the end with a folder of documents. The united front they presented was unmistakable. I was the outsider now. "Brian, thank you for joining us." Dad began formally, as if I were any employee rather than his son. "We wanted to discuss the future direction of Hartwell Fine Furnishings and clarify everyone's roles going forward." Dad outlined how the business landscape had changed, emphasizing the need for fresh perspectives and innovative marketing approaches. He talked about legacy and future generations without meeting my eyes once. Then came the hammer blow. "After careful consideration, your mother and I have decided that Jackson will be taking over as Chief Executive Officer when I retire next year," he stated flatly. "You will continue as Regional Operations Director for our northern locations, reporting to the new Chief Operations Officer we will be hiring next quarter." The room spun around me. "I have been working toward leading this company for 15 years, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You promised me this role my entire life." "Promises have to adapt to changing circumstances," Mom interjected. "Jackson has shown exceptional leadership potential and vision for where the market is heading." I turned to Jackson, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "And you knew about this. For how long they approached me about it last year," he admitted. "I thought you knew, Brian. They said they had discussed it with you." Attorney Stillwell cleared his throat and slid documents across the table. "We have restructured the company ownership," he explained clinically. "William and Margaret will retain 40% ownership during the transition period. Jackson will receive 40%, with the remaining 20% distributed among key non-family executives for retention purposes." "And my share?" I asked already, knowing the answer. "You will receive a 5% stake from your parents' portion upon their retirement," he replied, not meeting my eyes. 5%. After 15 years of 60-hour weeks, missed vacations, and complete dedication, my brother, with 2 years of minimal contribution, would own 8 times my share. This cannot be legal, I protested. I have equity agreements from when we expanded to our 4th location. Those were contingent on a leadership track that has been reassessed, Stillwell responded. The paperwork was never finalized. The betrayal crushed me like a physical weight. So this is it. You are just pushing me aside for Jackson because he is more charming at dinner parties. Brian, this is not personal, Dad said firmly. Business decisions cannot be based on family sentiment or who worked harder. They must be about who is right for the future. Not personal. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. You are my parents. You raised me to believe that hard work and dedication matter. You pointed me toward this company as my future since I was a child. And now you tell me none of that matters because Jackson has better social skills. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. We never thought you were the right fit for leading the company, Brian. You are too rigid, too focused on details rather than vision. We should have been more honest with you sooner. Those words cut deeper than anything else. Not just the current betrayal, but the revelation that they had never believed in me. All those years of encouragement and pride had been lies. So this entire time, when you told me I was working toward taking over someday, you never meant it. I asked, my voice breaking. We hoped you would develop the necessary people skills, Dad replied. But that never happened. I stormed out of the conference room, ignoring their calls to come back and discuss this rationally. There was nothing rational about having your life's purpose yanked away by the people who had instilled it in you. For a week, I ignored calls and messages from my family. I took sick days from work for the first time in years, unable to face the employees who would soon learn I had been passed over. Sarah stayed by my side, alternating between comforting me and expressing outrage at my parents' decision. You built half of what that company is today, she fumed. They cannot just erase that. Eventually, I agreed to meet my parents at their home on Sunday afternoon. I arrived with a counter-proposal, a fair equity distribution, a position as co-CEO with Jackson, focusing on different aspects of the business and acknowledgement of my historical contributions. They listened politely, then rejected every point. The decision is final, Brian Dad stated. You can accept the role we have offered, or you can leave the company with a reasonable severance package, but the leadership structure is not negotiable. And if I go public with how the founder's grandson has been treated, I ask desperation making me consider options I would never normally threaten. Then you will receive nothing, Dad replied coldly, and you will damage the very company you claim to care about. I looked at these people who had raised me, taught me values of fairness and hard work, and saw strangers. Whatever love had been there was now conditional on my acceptance of their betrayal. I quit, I said quietly. Effective immediately. I will not work another day for people who value charm over commitment and flashy marketing over actual results. As I walked out of my childhood home, I felt both utterly lost and strangely liberated. 15 years of my life had just evaporated, but for the first time, my future was entirely my own to determine. The next 3 months were the darkest of my life. Without the structure of work and the purpose I had clung to for so long, I fell into a depression that worried Sarah and my few close friends. I questioned everything about myself. If my own parents did not value my skills and contributions, perhaps I truly was lacking in some fundamental way. You are not seeing yourself clearly, Sarah insisted one evening after I had spent the day in pajamas staring at the ceiling. Your parents made a business decision based on personalities and preferences, not objective merit. It reflects on them, not you. Her unwavering belief in me became my lifeline. Slowly, I began to consider what skills I actually possessed, independent of Hartwell Furnishings. I had extensive knowledge of the furniture industry, strong vendor relationships, and proven abilities in operations management and cost efficiency. These were valuable regardless of my last name. A turning point came when I ran into Harold Weber, one of our longtime suppliers, at a local coffee shop. He approached me immediately. "Brian, I heard what happened." "Complete nonsense, if you ask me," he said, pulling up a chair without invitation. "Your brother has already canceled our premium line in favor of cheaper imports. Quality is tanking over there." As we talked, Harold revealed that many vendors and employees were unhappy with the new direction. The merger had diluted the brand identity just as I had predicted. Customer complaints were rising as craftsmanship standards fell. "You know what you should do," Harold said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Start your own place. Focus on what Hartwell used to be about before all this corporate nonsense. I know at least a dozen craftspeople who would follow you in a heartbeat." The idea took root. I began offering freelance consulting to smaller furniture retailers, helping them optimize their operations and sourcing. Word spread quickly, and soon I had more work than I could handle alone. Former colleagues called for advice, and several asked if I was planning something bigger. One Friday evening, I received a call from George Talmadge, my grandfather's original business partner, who had retired 20 years earlier. He invited me to lunch the following day, saying he had heard about my situation and wanted to discuss it. Over sandwiches at his country club, George shared stories about my grandfather I had never heard before. Thomas was forced out of his first woodworking job, he revealed. His boss took credit for his designs and fired him when he complained. That is why he was so adamant about starting his own place, where craftsmanship would be respected. I never knew that I admitted seeing parallels to my own situation. "History repeats itself," George said, pushing a folder across the table. "These are the original business plans and philosophy statements your grandfather wrote. I thought you should have them." Reading my grandfather's words that night changed everything. His vision had been about quality integrity and creating furniture that would become family heirlooms. The current Hartwell furnishings had drifted far from those ideals. The next morning, I called Sarah into our home office where I had covered the walls with notes and sketches. "I'm going to start my own furniture company," I announced. Not to compete directly with Hartwell's on price or scale, but to recapture what it was supposed to be about craftsmanship that lasts generations. Her face lit up. "That is the first time you have sounded like yourself in months." We spent the weekend outlining a business plan. I would focus on high-quality, sustainably sourced furniture with transparent manufacturing processes. Each piece would be made by skilled craftspeople, earning fair wages with designs that blended timeless aesthetics with modern functionality. I reached out to several former Hartwell employees who had left after the merger. Martin Reeves, our former master craftsman, was the first to sign on. "I have been waiting for this call," he said. The soul is gone from that place now. Securing funding was the biggest challenge. Banks were reluctant to finance a startup competing against established players like Hartwell, but George Talmadge introduced me to several investors who had known my grandfather and appreciated my vision for returning to quality craftsmanship. After 3 rounds of presentations and negotiations, I secured enough capital to lease an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of town. The building needed extensive renovation, but its soaring ceilings, abundant natural light, and rich history made it perfect for what I envisioned. The day I signed the lease, Sarah proposed we celebrate with dinner at our favorite restaurant. When we arrived, I was shocked to find not just a reservation, but a small gathering of supporters, Harold, Martin, George, and several others who believed in what I was building. "To authentic home," George toasted, using the name I had chosen for my new venture. "May it honor the true spirit of craftsmanship that Thomas Hartwell originally stood for." As we celebrated, my phone buzzed with a text from Jackson Hurd about your new venture. "We need to talk." I silenced the phone and put it away. That conversation could wait. Tonight was about looking forward, not back. The next 6 months were the most challenging and rewarding of my life. I worked 18-hour days alongside a growing team of dedicated craftspeople and designers. We renovated the factory, installed equipment, sourced materials, and developed our first collection of furniture. Every decision reflected the values I had outlined: quality, sustainability, transparency, and fair labor practices. 2 weeks before our scheduled opening, I received another message from Jackson, more urgent this time. Dad is pushing the company in a bad direction. Multiple stores struggling. Need your advice. Please. I ignored it again. My focus needed to be on Authentic Home now. Our grand opening exceeded every expectation. Former Hartwell customers who valued quality sought us out specifically. Our website crashed from traffic when a popular design blog featured our commitment to transparent manufacturing. By the end of the first day, we had sold nearly half our initial inventory and taken deposits for custom pieces that would keep our workshop busy for months. As I locked up that night, exhausted but exhilarated, I realized something profound. The betrayal that had devastated me had actually set me free. I was no longer building someone else's vision or seeking approval that would never come. I was creating something true to my own values and abilities. 6 months later, Authentic Home opened its second location. 1 year after that, we launched our online custom design platform. The business was not just surviving, but thriving with a waiting list for our signature pieces and features in national design magazines. And then came the news. I had been half expecting Hartwell Fine Furnishings was closing 3 of its locations due to restructuring. Industry rumors suggested they were on the verge of bankruptcy. The following Tuesday, Jackson appeared at my office without warning. He looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders that I had never seen before. "Your assistant said you might have 5 minutes," he said hesitantly from the doorway. I would not have come if it was not important. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. We had not spoken in nearly 3 years, except for brief awkward encounters at family events I rarely attended. "Hartwell's is failing," he stated bluntly once seated. "The merger was a disaster. The imported furniture line has had massive quality issues and returns. Dad fired the COO he hired and has been running everything himself, refusing to listen to anyone." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the surge of conflicting emotions. "Because I never wanted this," Brian Jackson admitted, his voice cracking. "I never wanted to run the company. Dad and Mom pushed me into it. They made it sound like you and I had discussed it, and you were fine stepping back. By the time I realized what had really happened, everything was signed, and you were gone." I stared at him in disbelief. "You expect me to believe you had no idea what was happening? You sat in that meeting while they offered me 5% of my birthright. I knew they were promoting me, yes. But they told me you had agreed to focus on regional operations because you preferred the hands-on work to corporate leadership." He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I should have talked to you directly. That is on me, and I am sorry." His apology caught me off guard. "So why are you here now?" "Hartwell's problems are not my concern anymore. The bank is threatening to call our loans," he explained. "Dad is considering bankruptcy options. 30 years of business could disappear, and 300 people will lose their jobs." I thought. "I hoped you might have ideas. You always understood the operational side better than anyone." I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Part of me felt vindicated that my predictions about the merger and new direction had proven correct. Another part grieved for the legacy my grandfather had built now on the brink of collapse. "Have Mom and Dad sent you to ask for money?" I asked directly. "No, they do not even know I am here," Jackson replied. "They are still too proud to admit they made a mistake. I am here because I remember how you used to fix problems nobody else could solve." His honesty disarmed me. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the favored golden child who had taken my place, but as someone who had also been manipulated by our parents' expectations and machinations. "Show me the financials," I said finally. "I cannot promise anything, but I will look." Over the next few hours, Jackson walked me through the company's dire situation. The merger had loaded them with debt just as sales began declining due to quality issues. The riverfront location continued draining resources, and several key employees had left for competitors. Dad had made increasingly desperate moves, slashing prices and cutting corners in production, which only accelerated the downward spiral. They set us both up, I realized aloud, as the complete picture became clear. They never prepared you for the role, but pushed you into it anyway. They never valued my contributions, but kept me working toward a goal they had no intention of honoring. We were both being used. Jackson nodded slowly. I think Dad wanted to control everything forever. Naming me successor was his way of maintaining that control. He knew I would defer to him while you would have made your own decisions. The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the past 3 years. The betrayal still hurt, but seeing it as a manipulation rather than a judgment of my worth eased some of the lingering pain. Here is what I can offer, I said, as our meeting concluded. I will develop a restructuring plan for Hartwell's based on these financials. But I will only present it if Mom and Dad request it, directly acknowledge their mistake, and agree to my terms without negotiation. What terms? Jackson asked. That depends on what I find in these numbers, I replied, but they will not like them. 1 week later, I sat across from my parents in the Hartwell Fine Furnishings conference room where they had shattered my future 3 years earlier. Jackson sat beside me now, rather than them, a symbolic shift that was not lost on anyone present. Dad looked older, the strain of the company's decline evident in new lines on his face. Mom's usual perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, her eyes anxious as she clutched her tablet containing the company's financial reports. Thank you for coming, Brian. Dad began stiffly. Jackson tells us you have some thoughts on our current situation. I have more than thoughts, I replied, sliding folders across the table. I have a complete restructuring plan that could save the company, though not without significant changes. I outlined my proposal: close the failing locations, immediately sell the corporate headquarters, and relocate to a more modest facility, terminate the merger agreement, using the quality failure clauses, return to the original Hartwell focus on craftsmanship, and implement a transparent governance structure with checks on executive authority. This is radical, Dad protested. We would be giving up everything we have built over the past decade. What you built is failing, I stated flatly. These changes are the minimum necessary for survival. And what role do you see for yourself in this plan? Mom asked cautiously. None, I replied. I have my own successful company that requires my full attention, but I am willing to establish a partnership between Authentic Home and a restructured Hartwell's that would allow both to benefit from shared resources and market positioning. A partnership? Dad looked confused. What kind of partnership? Authentic Home would absorb Hartwell's custom furniture division and client list. Hartwell's would downsize to focus on mid-range retail with higher quality standards than your current offerings. We would share warehouse facilities and some administrative functions to reduce overhead. Both companies would remain independent but complementary. The terms were fair but firm. They would save much of the company and most employee jobs, but my parents would have to relinquish significant control and publicly acknowledge the partnership with my company. Why would you help us at all after what happened? Dad asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. I am not doing it for you, I replied honestly. I am doing it for the employees who built their lives around this company, for the craftspeople who deserve to practice their skills, and for grandfather's legacy, which deserves better than bankruptcy. After hours of discussion and several private conferences between my parents, they reluctantly agreed to my terms. The relief on Jackson's face was palpable. He would remain with Hartwell's, but in a product development role better suited to his actual interests, rather than the executive position he had never wanted. As we prepared to leave, Dad hesitantly extended his hand to me. We made a terrible mistake, Brian. I see that now. Yes, you did, I agreed, shaking his hand briefly. But business decisions cannot be based on family sentiment, right? They must be about what is best for the future. The irony of using his own words was not lost on him. He flinched slightly, but nodded in acknowledgement. 3 years after being cast aside, I had returned not as a supplicant, but as a savior, dictating terms from a position of strength, built entirely on my own merits. The partnership agreement was signed the following month, and the restructuring began immediately. Today, Authentic Home has 5 locations across 3 states with a thriving online business and international shipping. Hartwell's has stabilized under the new structure, with Jackson finding unexpected fulfillment in designing furniture collections rather than managing corporate operations. The partnership has benefited both companies, though we maintain distinct identities and leadership. My relationship with my parents has slowly healed, though it will never be what it once was. We interact primarily as business associates with occasional family dinners that remain somewhat formal. They have apologized multiple times in various ways, but some wounds leave permanent scars. The greatest lesson from this journey was discovering that my worth was never dependent on their validation or the role they designated for me. Being forced to create my own path led me to build something far more meaningful and personally satisfying than simply inheriting a family business ever could have been. What seemed like the ultimate betrayal became the catalyst for my authentic success. I now mentor young entrepreneurs, particularly those navigating family business dynamics, helping them establish healthy boundaries and recognize their own value independent of others' expectations. The freedom I found in building something true to my own vision rather than fulfilling someone else's has been the unexpected gift in this painful story. Sometimes the doors that close most painfully lead to paths we would never have discovered otherwise. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you to something better? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes our greatest setbacks can become our most powerful opportunities. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth is never defined by those who fail to recognize it.